My sister-in-law told my stalker schizophrenic ex my whereabouts plus one update. My ex-boyfriend Jake and I broke up a few years ago because he had a sudden psychotic episode and chased me around the entire neighborhood with a machete. He was placed in a mental health ward. Following this, his entire personality changed and he developed delusions, hallucinations and paranoia that the people were out to get him, which never went away. Also, a large part of his paranoia revolved around me controlling people around him and thinking I was trying to make him look crazy. He was let out of the hospital after some time and I took responsibility for him. He was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia. I did everything I could to be there for him. I went to all of his mental health appointments and stayed up at night to make sure he didn't leave the house alone. Even though we were no longer together, I cared for him. We kept talking for a little while as friends. I think the entire time we kept contact, he assumed we would get back together at some point. When I started a new relationship with my current partner Sam, Jake had a really bad psychotic episode and threatened both of us. He accused me of cheating on him with Sam before we broke up and sent both of us intense messages threatening he would turn us into pasture for his bloodhounds. Following this, I cut all contact with Jake. The only slight connection I have to Jake is my brother's girlfriend Jess. Her and Jake have been friends for years and have maintained their friendship. She knows the entire background to our relationship and never chooses sides. Later on, I got pregnant with Sam's baby in January and was 3 months pregnant. I had just told my family and close friends about the pregnancy. I told everyone to keep it quiet as I didn't feel ready to publicly announce it. Less than 24 hours passed after telling my side of the family and I received a phone call from Jake. He had found out I was pregnant and left a voicemail saying he would be filing for custody of the baby. Obviously, he was in a psychotic episode, so I ignored his calls and let his family know that he had reached out to me. By this point, it had been over a year since we had even spoken. He has no idea where I live or work, so I'm not worried about him showing up physically to confront me. I knew the only way he could have found out would have been through Jess. I called and confronted her about it and she admitted to it. She was extremely apologetic and said she didn't think it would matter. She thought he would be fine with the news and said he deserved to know. I was upset by this, but I hadn't explicitly told her not to tell Jake, so it could have just been a mistake. I forgave her but made it very clear that she shouldn't tell Jake any more information about me or the baby, and she agreed. I didn't hear anything from Jake for months. Last weekend was my baby shower. Sam and I had the baby shower together. It was more of a party than a traditional baby shower. We hired a function room at a bar and invited 80 people to come celebrate. We were all having a great time until I saw Jake standing at the bar, looking around. I managed to slip away without him seeing me and grabbed security to get him escorted out. I watched as security approached him and asked him to leave. He was furious and started yelling. He spotted me and tried running to me before being grabbed by security. He ended up biting one of them. He was yelling and demanding to talk to me before he would leave. Sam and several friends went over to him to try and talk him down, but it only escalated. He screamed at Sam, claimed that he was the baby's real dad and that we had never really broken up. At this point, I left to hide in the ladies' room until my mom came to let me know Jake was gone. He had eventually left after a little more screaming. I was mortified and we cut the baby shower short. I couldn't stop crying. It's now been a few days and I confronted Jess. She is the only person who would have possibly told him the location and time of the baby shower. I wasn't as kind on the phone with her this time. She admitted to telling him and apologized, but said how could I keep this a secret from him? I was furious and told her that she would no longer receive any news about me or the baby and that I would cut her out of my life. My brother called me after and asked me to forgive her. He knew she was wrong, but he didn't think he should also be punished for what she had done. He knew that by cutting her out I also wouldn't be telling him any news about the baby. In part he thought I should blame Jake for his reaction and not Jess, that she hadn't known he would show up. The damage was already done and I should let it go. Update: when I had my baby earlier than anticipated and Sam and I moved into a new house, I heard from Jake's family that he was on an extended mental health hold at the hospital as his psychotic episode was not subsidizing and he refused to take his medication and started painting really disturbing things. Apparently many of his paintings included me. I also warned them about his relationship with Jess and they seemed to take it seriously. They would keep an eye on them and told the hospital that she was not to be allowed visitation with him. My family stopped pestering me to forgive Jess. My mom had a heart-to-heart with me and finally understood why I had to cut my brother out. I didn't hear anything from my brother. Apparently my mom had stepped up and had a conversation with him about the severity of what Jess had done. It broke my heart to push my brother away as we had been so close. Unfortunately, things didn't stay so calm. After a few months I received a call from Jake. He had finally been released from the hospital and was embarrassed about his behavior at the baby shower. He told me he knew that the baby wasn't his. He cried and asked to speak with Sam. He wanted to personally apologize to him. Sam didn't want to talk to him. I told him I forgave him. I knew it wasn't his fault and that we should move on. I was also very firm with him and told him that under no circumstances would I let him be around me or my baby. If he tried to contact us, I wouldn't hesitate to call the police. He told us this was not over. About 2 weeks later, Jake showed up at Sam's workplace, with a gash on his head and was demanding to speak with him. They had a short conversation where Jake broke down in tears and begged to be forgiven. From what Sam told me, he didn't seem to be stable. In his apology he said, "I'm so sorry for confronting you in public like that. I should have spoken to you privately. Clearly you didn't know the baby wasn't yours and you were humiliated in front of your friends." Sam didn't want to provoke him, so said he accepted his apology and asked him to leave. Sam then called me to let me know what had happened. I was shattered. Obviously Jess had told him where Sam worked. I called Jake's family to let them know what had happened. They told me the next day he hadn't come home and were extremely worried. He wasn't meant to be driving as his license had been suspended, but he had taken his mom's car without her permission. A few days later, he was found by police in a building that was under construction, completely out of it and confused. He had driven 20 hours away from our town. He was taken to the local hospital and placed in their mental health ward. His family flew up to retrieve him. After all of that, my brother called me and asked if he could meet up with me for lunch one day, and I agreed and we met up. Then he told me all the crazy stuff that had happened with Jess. Apparently, when Jake got out of the hospital following the baby shower incident, he had shown up at their house to see Jess. My brother was really worried because he could tell that Jake was in a manic episode. He kept an eye on Jake while he visited and noticed that he was being extremely touchy-feely with Jess, who started to seem flirty with him as well. It made him really uncomfortable, so he made an excuse about him and Jess needing to go to a friend's house. When Jake left, him and Jess had a massive fight. He confronted Jess about the flirty behavior and she was extremely defensive. She flat out denied that she had been flirting or that Jake had been touching her at all. My brother decided to drop it. Not long after, Jake showed up at their house again, but this time Jess was at work. Jake told him that he was in love with Jess, confessed that they had been sleeping together, and showed him a bunch of text messages between the two of them to prove that he wasn't making this up. My brother asked him to leave. When Jess got home, he confronted her. At first she tried to deny it, but eventually confessed. She begged my brother to forgive her. She had realized after his outburst at the baby shower that she didn't love him. My brother was furious and told her to stay with her parents for a while. Ever since then, he hasn't heard from her. It's been months now, and it looks like things are over between the two of them.